I went through that and how interesting that is. And in the moment, it's painful because we go through that painful process. We live through it. And it's stuff that we don't even have time to do. You're thinking, how do I have time to do this? It's like when you come down with an illness, I don't have time to be sick. How in the hell can I be sick? I don't have time. For the love of God, why? And this is really challenging too, because when we're going through stress and we're going through anxiety and we're going through even maybe a slight depression or however we're feeling, this can really take us to rock bottom. How can this be happening to me? How am I going through this? And so, in this process, we have to step back, and it's so hard to take a step back in our own lives. It's so hard to see things clearly because of the stress and anxiety we're under. It's so hard to look at things honestly and see things for how they are. And so if you can try to, and I know that this is hard because in our own lives it's almost impossible. It's so much easier to step back and see clarity in other people's lives. And the one thing that I've realized that I can do is I can see clarity in other people's lives. And so I just keep telling myself, you know what, there's clarity in this situation. I might not be able to see it right this moment, but somebody else will be able to see it because it's there. It's not that bad. It's not horrible. There's something to be said about it. It's not that bad. There's going to be some way out. There's always another way. There's a way to something, and there's always a reason for something. I've dealt with injuries before where I'm like, how can this happen? How did I get injured? How did this happen? And it's like a fluke injury. Isn't that the worst thing when you go to a doctor? Wow, that's a fluke accident. How did that happen? And it's like you don't have this miraculous story to tell about how you jumped off this cliff to save this dog that was endangered, or you jumped out of your car and jumped into a burning car to save this elderly woman. You don't have any of those stories. It's actually quite the opposite, where you don't even want to tell it. And when you tell it, everybody just feels bad for you. And then you're like, why am I dealing with this? And I've realized that if we step back, it's to slow us down. It's to refocus what's happening. And if we can try to slow down in the moment, we might not have to go through this. And I know that many of us have had to go through the hard way of life, right? We've had to do the hard lessons. Other people can tell us what we should or shouldn't do, but we got to do it the hard way, right? We got to do it my way. I did it my way. We did it the hard way. And we did it the really hard way. And we did it the hard way over and over and over again. And in that process, we eventually learned not to keep doing it. But that was one particular lesson we learned the hard way. We probably learned multiple lessons the hard way. So I understand that it's easier said than done. But what I'm saying is if we can slow down in the moment, we don't have to deal with the pain and suffering on the back end. And so when things are too stressful, when things are too overwhelming, when things are too out of control, when things are too this, when things are too that, right? That becomes a problem. And when that happens, we get ourselves into a situation where something bad happens on the back end, right? So whether it's an auto accident or a choking situation or a fall or whatever that looks like. I've even had clients that have gotten up on ladders, and we'll talk more about that and how that happened and how they wish they would have just taken a moment to really think about what was happening so they wouldn't have gotten hurt. Stay tuned. Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time. You know it. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
This is Jake Busey, and you're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I've been talking about how kale, the leafy green, almost killed me. And how almost killing me really puts some things in perspective of how I need to slow down unless I want to deal with some other stuff that I just don't want to deal with. And I know that you've been through things recently that you just don't want to deal with, but guess what? It happened. It happened. And in that process, it was a learning curve. It was a painful learning curve. It was super, super painful. And so let's talk about that and what we learned from that. So if we can just slow down, because the one thing that we all think about later on down the road is, why didn't I slow down? Why didn't I give myself time? right? Why didn't I give myself time? Because we all actually have time to some degree, even though we might not realize it. And I know that I have a really tough schedule, and I know that many of my listeners and y'all have a tough schedule as well, like really super tough. And there's a lot going on. And you start the morning off really quickly and really early, and you end really late. And there's a lot going on. And many of you are eating late at night because you get home late. You're working out late at night because you're home late. It's just a lot. And so you're dealing with a lot of responsibilities. But we all can take some time to really think about how I need to play it safe to some degree. I need to put my values and things that are important to me in perspective, because I don't want to have that other thing on the other side happen where I have to take this extra time out to deal with something that I didn't really need to manifest. I didn't need to manifest that. And I think, why do these things happen is, because the why factor is always the big thing. Why? The why, God, why did you have to do this to me? Why is this happening to me in my life? Why in God's green creation am I having to deal with this? And I find that anytime that I have had like a fluke accident, like one of those accidents, you hate that, right? You always want to have that accident where people, like, it's in the news where you're like this amazing like savior, and you come down and you save people, and everybody goes, oh my God, this person saved this entire busload of kids, and they're in the hospital, but they're recovering quite well, and everybody wants to be that person with the accident. You don't want to be the person that's like, yeah, well, I was walking out of the office, I was late to a meeting, I fell off a curb, and I broke my ankle. Nobody wants that. And, breaking an ankle is not an easy deal. These things are really, really painful. Like I was talking about right before the break, the concept of falling off a ladder. I've had clients, I've had friends that literally were going up there to look at something on the roof, weren't paying attention, phone ringing, something else going on. They decide to go up there, they do it, bam, they're on the ground. Okay, some people have been in really, really serious pain and had to have surgeries immediately. Others not as bad. But at the same point in time, it's like we got to slow it down, put it in perspective, and really think about what really matters in our life on a day-to-day basis. And some things just need to be slowed down. And I've realized that if we slow it down and we take a bird's eye view at some things, we can actually step back and analyze it and see it for what it is. Taking a bird's eye view, stepping back, analyzing it, seeing it for what it is, we can really learn a lot about ourselves. We can learn a lot about ourselves, and we can learn about a lot about why we've gotten into these situations and consequences in the past. Because these consequences that come from these fluke accidents are not fun. They change our life for a long period of time. I mean, the last accident I had, the Kale was the Kale, but that was scary. That was scary. I mean, the imminence of death because of a vegetable is super scary and sad, because like I was saying, you don't want people wearing Kale t-shirts at your funeral. I mean, come on, there's got to be something better than that. You got to do something better than that. So it's like you got to, and not to anybody that's ever choked to death. That's horrible. But what I'm saying is that that's something that I know that they did not want to do. Okay. And so it's like looking at life and saying, okay, how do we put this in perspective? With that situation, it was painful for only a few, for like an hour after, but the fear factor was there. But when you have like an accident where you hurt your leg, you break your leg, something like that, that can be something that goes with you for months. That can change your life trajectory. That can change a lot of things. And for many of you like myself, if you enjoy exercise, or you enjoy some type of exercise, that can be really harmful because of the back end of that, right? Because you do something and then you can't do something you love that helps you to be calmer, and then all of a sudden you feel like you're stuck and you can't do it. So you see how it's just it's just an add-on effect to the pain and suffering that you're already dealing with. So we don't want to manifest any of these things to happen, so we have to slow it down. We don't want to manifest any of these things to happen, so we have to be calm and collected and slow things down. And that can be difficult because many of us are not used to slowing down. Many of us are unaccustomed to that type of reality. And also many of us are surrounded by people that also don't slow down, so that's also customary too for us to forget that or do things. I've realized, though, that when we're not slowing down and we're consistently not slowing down, the universe is going to want to slow you down to some degree. The universe is going to want to slow you down. And I also think principle-based wise, we want to be slowed down as well to some degree, but we don't realize it because we're missing things. And so ultimately, like the universe to some degree goes, oh, wait, boom, do it. And maybe we co-created it based on what we really need, not based on our own consciousness, but based on the subconsciousness of what we need in that moment. And so that can happen. And I know that it's one of the most painful things. And it's like, well, I guess I need to be on my own here. I need to take some time to focus my energy and figure out what I need and want in my life and really think about that. And one of the things that I've realized lately, and this is a big takeaway, and I hope it's something that maybe, you can share with other people and really think about this in your own life, is that I've realized that a lot of times, when I'm healthy, and this is something that I've dealt with my whole life, is my health issue and with the condition I was born with, and some of you know about that, and being, almost dying on the operating table and those sort of things. This is real. And so my health has always been a concern. But there's times that I take it for granted when I am feeling good. And then I find sometimes, like, when I'm in pain and I'm hurting, it's so painful. And it's like really focusing on that and realizing, okay, these things are happening or those things are happening. But I got to put it in perspective. I gotta put it in perspective. I gotta realize, okay, I might be dealing with this or that, but I do have this going on in my own life. I do have these things going on in my own life. Look, I do have my health. I do have this going on. And those are things that we need to examine and focus on. Those are things that we need to understand and see and remind ourselves the importance of those things. To remind ourselves the importance of those things and being able to see them for what they are. And that's what's so important. That's what's so important to do. That's what's so important to have. That's what's so important to be. And that's really going to help you too as well, to understand your place and your situation and to see the value in what you're doing day to day. And also to take some stress off too, because there are some things working out. Even though there might be something big in your life that's challenging, maybe tragic, overwhelming, causing you stress, anxiety, fear, maybe that's going on in some area of your life, but it's not in every area of your life. And that can be hard to see, because sometimes we group it all together because we have one thing going on that's not going the way we want it to, or it's stressful, or it's falling apart, or whatever's happening. And we start focusing on that and super focusing on that and bird dogging on that. And that is challenging. And it can feel overwhelming. And you got to step back. And it's hard to do this because that one thing can be taking over your life. That one thing can be creating a lot of, taking a lot of mind share. And you also got to be aware of that too. How much is that taking of you? How much of that is taking of your brain power? How much of that is taking of your emotion? And that's something to really focus on. So when you're driving down the road today and you're not focusing and you finally come into focus and you go, oh my gosh, how long did that take and what was on your mind? How long did that take and what was on your mind? And I want you to really think about that, because whatever was on your mind at that moment is the thing that's really taking up a lot of your mind share, especially if you're not focusing on the road or you're not focusing on that. And so other things are kind of going by the wayside. We got to understand that and see that for what it is. We got to understand that and see that for what it is, so that we can be aware of that, so that we can be aware of that situation, so that we can understand that that's happening, so that we can be aware of that and eliminate that. We might not be able to eliminate those actual thoughts, but we can be aware that it's taking up a lot of our mind share. We can also begin to be aware of what we can control and what we can't control and that sort of thing. And that's something that you really want to focus on and understand, process, delineate, and see. Because whatever that is, I want it to work out for you. Whatever it is, I want it to get resolved. But most of these things that you're probably fixating or focusing on cannot be resolved in a moment. And that's painful too, because the brain wants a solution immediately. The brain wants a solution immediately, and without getting a solution, it becomes stressed out and panicked. And that panic causes anxiety, depression, fear, all those things that do not help us. And they create us to put ourselves into positions of Kale choking you. Mm-hmm. So think about it. So we have to focus on those things so that we don't have these things happen, so that we realize that there are good things happening in our life. There are things that are sustainable. There are things that are powerful. There are things that we can control. There are things that we can do. And we have to just do them. And sometimes it can feel overwhelming because we need to do it. We just need to do it. Get it done. We need to just get it done and move on. And some of those can be some of the challenging things to do because we don't, because of the stress level or the anxiety